everyone, welcome. Thank you for joining us. We are seeing attendees trickle in to join us. We are so happy to have you here and to have joined Rachel and me. We are going to keep this pretty casual between Rachel and I, addressing some of the issues that we see in the work that we do. But we'll get started with introducing ourselves. My name is Payal Salzberg. I am a litigator in Boston. I focus my practice on business litigation and commercial and white-collar criminal defense. Rachel?
Hi, I'm Rachel Jennings. Thank you so much for being here. I'm a professional development and pro bono manager at a firm called Neal, Gerber and Eisenberg here in Chicago, Illinois. Before that, I practiced as a litigator and I also worked on the law school side. So I'm really excited to engage with all the legal professionals who are joining us from law school to practice to working on the other side. And in my role right now, I work with professional development, pro bono work, and with well-being initiatives. So I'm excited to kind of talk about the connection between all of those.
Fantastic. So actually, Rachel, let me pitch a question to you. How can engaging in pro bono work contribute to personal growth and well-being at the same time?
Okay, I like to think about this pile in kind of like three buckets, if you will. Or maybe they're more like interconnecting circles, like the Venn diagram of positives that pro bono work can kind of bring to you in your practice, wherever you are, whether you're a student or you're a practicing attorney. And from that perspective, I think the first way that pro bono work helps you develop is in your professional development of your skills, right? So that could be a stretch assignment, that could be developing substantive skills that are really critical for your practice, that could be developing core skills, leadership, time management, things like that. The second bucket I see is in developing meaningful connections. And I know you'll talk about that a little when you're talking about volunteer opportunities as well. Pro bono work can give you the opportunity to seek out mentors, to find people that energize you, go towards them and take on pro bono work together. It can really help you develop your aligned relationships. So you are developing connections that align with your values. And then the third bucket that kind of overlaps with the meaningful connections is just improving your overall well-being. And I want to spend a lot of time unpacking that today because I think pro bono work and volunteer work, as you know, can really improve our holistic well-being, whether it's physical well-being or mental well-being. And if you don't mind, I want to just zoom out a little bit and give a little context to our audience for this, because in my work and in my practice, I typically hear people talk about pro bono work specifically in two different ways, right? So they'll talk about it in terms of the very real and important critical benefits for the pro bono client themselves, right? You know, the people who are the most vulnerable in our society who need that pro bono work. They'll also talk about pro bono work in terms of the duty of the legal professional to do pro bono work, right? ABA Model Rule 6.1 says that attorneys should provide legal services to those who can't pay. And so if you think about it in terms of your duty and your professional responsibility, I do think that's motivating to quite a lot of people. But I'm just so excited to be here today to talk with you all and to engage with our participants, because my hope is, and my hunch is, that if we are able to kind of frame pro bono work as a wellness initiative for yourself, as a way to improve your overall well-being, that might motivate more of us to do pro bono work. And so I see so many interconnections with pro bono and well-being. So I'm excited to kind of have this conversation.
Thank you. And Tara, you just jumped in, so I will let you take over moderating duties.
Thank you so much. So sorry that I'm coming in hot from another webinar, but it's really lovely to be here. I'm just going to make a couple of quick procedural announcements. If you are interested in CLE for this program, there will be 2 poll questions, 2, not 4, that you need to answer. So please go ahead and answer those. I will post at some point during the program the link to fill out the form to request CLE. So you can do that at any time. That's also available on the iWill website. And the other thing is, don't forget to register for our iWill's participation challenge as part of Wellbeing Week in Law. Attending this is a great example of participating, so you're free to use that. And then also, please put your questions in the chat and I will kind of save them and pull them all together and ask them at the end. And Pyle, have you had a chance to there's actually 3 poll questions, not 2, 3. Okay. Pyle, have you had a chance to introduce yourself yet?
Yes, we
Okay,
have.
awesome. All right, really.
We just jumped in. We were so excited to talk about this.
I know, that is so exciting. And I'm really excited to see everyone that is here today. So that is wonderful. So, Rachel, did you have a chance at all in your intro to go over kind of some of the scientific basis or evidence base of volunteerism or pro bonoism in terms of its impact on health and well-being?
I didn't, and so let's turn to that. And if you don't mind, I might share a few websites too. So
yes,
first, I want to provide you with some citations, right? Some evidence. There are several research-backed, peer-reviewed studies that have shown that volunteer work directly improves your overall well-being. Okay, and I'm making the pitch to you that pro bono work essentially is a form of volunteer work as well, right? And I think that a lot of those in our profession, again, we think of it as our duty. We think of it as separate, skills-based volunteering. And so we sometimes separate those in our minds, but I do think we can cite these cases kind of like as a C site, right? They're indirect, but they really apply. So let me just share really quickly a few studies that you might be able to kind of reference and take back with you here.
So just a quick thing, I see in the question answers, I said we didn't hear an intro and cite. So should we go through the intro again? Because there may be people who weren't there for the first minute or so.
Oh, yeah.
yeah.
So Rachel, you want to tell a little bit about yourself again? Sorry.
Yeah. So I'm Rachel Jennings. I'm a professional development and pro bono manager at Neil, Gerber, and Eisenberg in Chicago, Illinois. In that role, I help develop our attorneys in all ways. So develop their skill set and develop their well-being. We manage our firm's well-being initiative and help our attorneys do pro bono work. And before that, I practiced as a litigator, and I also worked on the law school side. So I'm excited to engage with our law student attendees today too.
Perfect. And I'm Pyle Salzberg. I'm a litigator in a small firm in Boston, Massachusetts. I primarily practice in the business litigation and white collar criminal defense world, and I have a whole life outside of the practice of law that involves volunteering a lot. So here to talk about that. Okay, back to your slides, Rachel.
Yeah, so we were just noting that there's some scientific studies, Harvard School of Public Health and Mayo Clinic and the Cleveland Clinic, that have all shown that volunteer service, and then by extension pro bono service and pro bono work, helps to improve your mental well-being. It decreases risks of anxiety and depression. It helps decrease isolation and loneliness because you're making those meaningful connections doing volunteer or pro bono work. It helps lower your blood pressure on balance. And so, Tara, I think with pro bono work, it is important to note that the pro bono work itself, and this I think applies to Pyle with volunteering, can be challenging, can be stressful. You might be dealing with clients who have experienced real trauma, and vicarious trauma is real. So I do want to acknowledge that and make sure that our attendees are really mindful when they're taking on new pro bono work to kind of help assess what time commitment might be involved, what the client is facing, and then if they're and then have the right supports in place for themselves as they're going forward. But on balance, the pro bono work really improves your overall well-being.
Now, kind of want to jump in on something that you mentioned, Rachel. It's the crossover between, pro bono work and community engagement and volunteering. And just as an anecdote, one of the things that I do in my, volunteering world is I work in the kitchen at a local homeless shelter. And I've made friends there, and they know I'm a lawyer. And at some point, some of them who are actually employees there, but have had things in their past, in their criminal records that are so old, but they would like to get it sealed. And they actually came up to me and asked, hey, can you help with this? And I was like, you're my friend. Obviously, I can help you with this. And so it's so rewarding to be able to do that for them. They're my friends, and I've become friends with them through my community volunteering work. But then it's now helped me get this pro bono work where, again, I get to stand up in court and argue for why this should be sealed, or I get to learn about what forms to fill out to file for getting a criminal record sealed. So there can be depending on what cause is special to you and dear to you, there can be an overlap where you're not only getting that personal, non-lawyer satisfaction out of it because I'm there making meals during Sundays, but I can also use that in a way to help somebody else with my, with my professional skills.
Yeah, those are really great examples. And the other thing that I think is worth talking about real quick, Rachel, is really the overlap, and Pyle, the overlap between sort of the well-being benefits and the professional development benefits, right? So like not just how does this impact your well-being, but how might it also give you a leg up at work or allow you to develop skills that you might need to become a better lawyer also.
Yeah, I mean, I see so much overlap with that in my role at my firm at Neil Gerber and Eisenberg. If you don't mind, I'll just share this with you just to kind of look again at some of these benefits and then again how they really overlap, right? So some of those benefits are direct skills transfer and being able to develop core skills. So in my firm, some of our junior litigation associates are able to take their first deposition and defend their first deposition, but on a pro bono matter and get the real life practical experience. That's what our law students are doing in their pro bono endeavors. You also get a lot more autonomy, especially if you're a junior attorney on a pro bono matter. That was the case for me when I was a litigation associate. I was able to kind of run my own pro bono matter and engage solely with the client myself and really kind of think about the legal issue from a different perspective. And just being able to have that experience, I think, made me a much better attorney overall. And I think that applies for attorneys who are later in their career too. Pro bono will provide skills development that'll let you stretch. And, let's say you've been practicing IP law for 30 years, for example. I just had this at a pro bono clinic last October, pro bono training. We had a brand new attorney who had just started and a partner who had been practicing for 30 years. But they talked at the training and said, I think we're on the same playing field, because the IP attorney said, none of this is regular to my practice, but he just wanted to help, and by virtue of that, it was developing his skills. So one other thing I wanted to mention about professional development, just for those joining us, is that there's 11 states in the US that offer CLE credit for pro bono work. And so if you're in one of those states, you want to make sure that you're just taking advantage of that. You're developing those skills, and you can also earn your required continuing legal education credits for doing that work. I think the biggest overlap, Tara, is between the connections that you develop and that Pyle was referencing, the friendships you build when you're volunteering or doing pro bono work, the mentorship opportunities you have. And I think those contribute immensely to your overall well-being. We're talking so much about how people are not feeling engaged and how people are feeling isolated and lonely. And we're not really getting a lot of chances to connect. And so just try to think of pro bono as another way to really get engaged, to seek out people when you like their energy, seek them out and kind of engage with them in a volunteer opportunity or pro bono work.
That's great. And I think that's a really great segue for me to throw it over to Pyle and ask her, there's a lot of talk right now both in law school and in career practice about the development of a professional identity. But I think we also sometimes don't always focus on our identity outside of work, right? Our identity beyond the office as contributing to our well-being. So I was hoping that you might be able to speak to that, Kyle, a little bit, both kind of from a science basis, but also from your own experience.
Sure, and I think this is something that I missed the boat on when I was a junior attorney, and so I'm very vocal and outspoken about this issue. Is don't put all your eggs in the lawyer basket, because at some point one of those eggs is going to break, and then that's it. You're done, right? So you need to have multiple identities. Where in my case, I am a volunteer at Mass General, so that's my identity. I'm a pediatric volunteer. I'm a volunteer at the homeless shelter. So in my capacity there, I'm the girl who makes meals every Sunday for 400 people. And then there's the lawyer identity, and then there's I'm a sister, auntie. So there's all these different persons that I am that all make up one of me. And if at any one point in time, one of those fails, so for example, if I'm get a bad review at work, or I get laid off, or something that happens or I lose a case or lose a motion, that doesn't affect or completely negate my entire identity. It's just one piece of me, because I still have that next Sunday, Sunday's coming up, I still have to go be somebody else. I still have to go hug the kids. So that's so important for just being grounded, to have multiple identities in that way, that you're not defined by any one thing that you do. I think that's absolutely critical. I mean, I'm not seeing the science on this, but from my own experience, I've lived it, and I can only say that you need to have that backup identity. You can't put all of it in one basket.
Yeah, I think that's really wonderful advice and a great example. Linda, you can go ahead and launch that first poll question if you want, so that we get one of those out there. And you can just quickly tell us who you are, and just remember, this is especially for the folks who are looking to get CLE credit, so that we can go ahead and confirm to the powers that be that you are here.
But also we're just interested in hearing who's here. And so we
yes,
can
exactly.
tailor some of our points towards you. If we have more law students, we can talk more about law school. If we have more people who are in private practice or in government, we can shift.
Exactly. Okay, so I have a question from the audience that's super relevant to kind of where we're going right now. And the question is, can you explain the meaning of aligned relationships and the role of volunteerism and pro bono work in combating imposter syndrome? Someone mentioned they saw that on the last slide. So I think you can both speak to that. Payal, do you want to start?
Sure. And my understanding of aligned relationships is twofold. One, that if it's a cause that you are passionate about. So for example, in my case, I'm passionate about children and children in the foster care system, children who are court involved, and also about hunger and people experiencing homelessness. When I am around people in my volunteering time, around people that are passionate about the same things, I have something to talk to them and relate to them about. And what is connection, right? What is a relationship? It's having something in common so you can share the good things and share the not so good things about, and have people to talk about. If the people that I'm around, not that they're not interested in things. So for example, the things that come across to me with kids in foster care system, can I talk to my parents about it? Sure. But they don't have the same alignment that I do with the cause that I'm, passionate about. And then in terms of the imposter syndrome, I will tell you, imposter syndrome is very real. I still feel it. I'm 15 years in practice, and I still feel it a lot of the times when I'm in new spaces. And putting yourself out there through the volunteerism and through pro bono work forces you to see the good in you and the skill in you and the talent in you. You don't need to be 110% perfect to help somebody. You can be you can just know a little bit, but as long as you know enough to help somebody through, you're valuable, you're needed. And so that really helps me with my imposter syndrome when I'm in a new space saying, hey, I may not know everything about something, but at least I can help in my own way and I belong.
I love that. That's, I think, particularly the point that you make about, I think for a lot of us in the legal profession who have that sort of type A perfectionist personality, being in an environment where you can help someone, and even if you're not being perfect, is really, that's a lovely example. So thank you. And Rachel, how about you?
Well, I love the discussion about imposter syndrome, because I think the studies show that, the studies show that attorneys, more so than the general population, do suffer from it. And I think that speaks to what you mentioned, Tara, that, you know, a part of our jobs is to be able to give the exact advice. I mean, it's not very common for us to say, I don't know. I think we can get better about that and being a little more comfortable in that space. I don't know, and I will find the answer for you. But a lot of our attorneys, once in a while, will start and they'll say, like, I feel imposter syndrome, or I feel like I'm not ready to take on that pro bono task because I'm still junior, or because I've been practicing in another area for 20 years and I don't want to transfer. And so I love to share with my attorneys and my legal professionals this slide here, or this website this is a great article from Taproot Foundation, where it's kind of like one of the best ways the study showed to combat or counteract imposter syndrome is to volunteer your skills, right? So volunteer will allow you to flex your expertise. It'll allow you to add a few additional skills. Doing pro bono work will help you to leverage your skills to gain experience. You know, a lot of attorneys, when they're making their way to become partner, I saw we have a lot of people in private practice on, you know, you can take on a pro bono project when you're getting close to becoming partner and develop additional leadership skills that will kind of combat the imposter syndrome now and help you when you're on the other side and when you are a partner and you're stepping into those spaces in your billable work. So I just think that let's reframe the conversation. Let's keep talking about imposter syndrome as much as we can, because I've absolutely felt it. I think, you know, everyone likely has felt it, especially in our legal profession, our legal roles. But, you know, jump in anyway. And we'll talk about ways to find pro bono work that might fit, you know, especially if you're feeling uncomfortable, that might fit your values or might kind of ease you into it as well.
Yeah, and certainly we know, right, from the research in terms of what makes people feel happy at work, those kind of basic psychological needs of autonomy and mastery, feeling like you're good at something, and relatedness. And I think that this discussion about volunteering, combating imposter syndrome, and pro bono service combating imposter syndrome, because it's allowing you to both connect, right, socially connect with people, you know, develop mentor-mentee relationships, but also allowing you to develop that mastery in a way that may not be within the scope of a giant case where you're the least qualified or the least experienced person on the team, right? Where you go into a situation where you're it, or you're one of two people working on a matter. That's a very different experience.
And it also gives you a sense of purpose, right? So sometimes I know that, you know, at some point in my past, I was a patent litigator where my work, the impact was on businesses and companies. And so I couldn't see a personal impact, right? And yeah, could I have gone to a different area of law? But I couldn't. That was my situation. So what I did was to find pro bono cases where I could see a real impact of me using my talent and my skills as a lawyer, right? I thought, why did we go to law school? To have an impact on somebody, to be able to help somebody. And yes, we are helping the corporations and the companies, but sometimes that having that personal relationship and connection and impact is so important for you to feel like you're doing meaningful work. And so, you know, pro bono can be a really, really good way of finding that meaning.
Yeah, that's such a good example. And we, you know, we also know, right, that meaning and purpose can contribute to to people's overall general sense of well-being and as well as overall health. So, and it's a really good point that pro bono and volunteerism, they come in and combat well-being in a really variety of, or they don't combat well-being, they support well-being in a variety of different ways. So great examples. And we've had a few questions that lean towards the more practical side of this issue. So maybe we could talk a little bit about, we had a question about retired attorneys and how they might get involved. So maybe we could talk from both of your perspectives of what are the entry points and the avenues into volunteerism and into pro bono service.
Sure. So I'll jump in on the volunteerism side. And oh my gosh, if you are a retired attorney, you are my dream person to come to get help, right? On anything. Board service. There are so many nonprofit boards that are looking for people with a legal background, right? And if you're retired and you have the time to commit to that, that is an amazing way to use your skills and talent to get on a board. It doesn't need to be a paid board. Do a nonprofit board. That is amazing. And you don't, again, you can be a mentor for people that are either practicing now. Put yourself, in a bar association where there's younger lawyers coming up and there's more junior lawyers coming up, and you can be a mentor on the skills and talents that you've developed and expertise that you've developed. You probably have amazing connections to people in the community, not just the legal community, but also outside of the legal community. Use those connections to amplify and bring up people that don't have those same connections and and opportunities. So, if you're retired and you have the time to put into it, there are so many things like that, especially board service, for you to spend your energy on.
What do you think, Rachel?
I agree with what Pao said, and I want to kind of even drill down a little bit in terms of, and I think that I'll share my screen here, I think we can kind of go through some of these questions when you're trying to decide what kind of pro bono work do I want to take on, or what kind of volunteer work do I want to take on. And I think maybe we might be able to do a poll question after this, but let me just kind of share this for a second. So these are kind of some ways I think about it when you're trying to enter into your pro bono work or your volunteer work. You might want to start by evaluating your priorities, right? What is your top priority for doing this pro bono work or for doing this volunteer work? Are you trying to gain relevant work experience? Some of my attorneys want to do pro bono work, but they only want to stay in their lane. And they're like, I want to do something that's related to the type of work I do. And you'd be surprised at how many connections you can make, because often I'll have an attorney who says, like, I'm an M&A attorney. I'm probably not going to be doing a lot of mergers on the pro bono side, but there's so many transferable options. So you might want to gain relevant work experience. You might want to connect with others. Again, we keep coming back to that meaningful connection, the mentorship connections, finding people whose values align with yours, finding people who energize you and going towards them, and asking them to work on a pro bono matter with you. You might really just want to contribute towards a mission that you believe in. You feel really passionate about an issue, and you want to help in whatever way you can, whether that aligns with your work experience or not. Many of you might be concerned about time. And I'm just so grateful that you're here today taking this hour with us to be talking about it, but many of you might be considerate about your time, or for those of you who are legal professionals on the call, you're trying to get your attorneys to do pro bono work and you want to offer options to them. So if that's your top priority, there's so many options for limited scope engagements, for a once a month clinic or a once a month 1 hour intake call. One of my favorite things is the ABA free legal answers, right? It's a virtual legal clinic. You can put it on your calendar for once a month, invite a mentor or a friend to join you, answer 3 civil legal questions it's all virtual, and help people directly that way. It's very bite-sized. And finally, you might be looking, and this applies to both volunteer work and pro bono work, but is support offered? There's certain pro bono projects where you just jump in, like, I'm jumping in the deep end, I'll figure it out. And you're able to do that, and other people are less comfortable with that. And so there's lots of pro bono opportunities where the legal service organization will provide you training, will provide you a phone a friend, an attorney at their organization with whom you can work and ask questions and get forms. and, sample documents. So those are some ways to kind of evaluate options. I saw many of the people on the call are practicing in large firms. And so if your firm has someone like me, a pro bono manager, pro bono counsel, pro bono coordinator, pro bono committee, seek those people out and they'll help you walk through options and ideas. And you can share with them, this is my priority. Like I only need a bite-sized I can't fit anything else in, and that's fine. And we can kind of, even those small engagements will really improve your well-being. And I think that the value question, this Pyle says this much better than me, but the way I think of it is just asking like, what breaks your heart right now? Or maybe a more positive way is just what inspires you, what mission, what attorney that's doing pro bono work inspires you, what mission of a nonprofit or a legal services organization inspires you, and then just going towards that. And you might even start there with those value questions and then say like, this particular thing speaks to me, and I only have a certain amount of time, and I need support, and I want to get relevant work experience related to that issue. So
yeah, those are those are all great examples, and speaking particularly to that timing piece, like we have examples today of people who are giving a tremendous amount of time to the to pro bono work and to volunteerism and community service. But as Rachel mentioned, there's a lot of different opportunities for participation that are much more limited, right? Like I was a tax lawyer, there's often by bar a tax clinic, right? With your local bar, like might be on a Saturday morning, people come in and ask questions, and it's very time limited. When my kids were small and I wanted to involve them in community service options, we would go to the food bank and we would bag the groceries at the food bank, because that was something that we could do together. And it was just something that we would sign up to do for 2 hours. So it was it was small. It wasn't a big thing, but it was what that we could manage and what we could do together. So I think there's a lot of different entry points. And from a purely practical perspective, if you're thinking, where do I turn to? Your local bar association, your state bar, your local bar association is a really good entry point. They often have a pro bono committee. They often have, pro bono intake or managers who kind of organize those projects as well. So there's lots of different entry points. Okay, so next question that we're going to go to is, if you are thinking about some of the benefits for organizations and companies to engage or have their employees engage in pro bono work or engage in a community service event, what would you say to someone who is trying to kind of persuade their organization or company to support those efforts?
I can start.
Go ahead, Rachel.
To me, speaking from a professional development lens, right, or just engagement is kind of almost one of the number one things that I would share. Just pro bono work is another way to really get your attorneys engaged and connected, perhaps back in the office, perhaps together at a pro bono clinic serving clients. My firm, we planned a great pro bono clinic with our local Association of Corporate Counsel chapter, and we paired with a local legal services organization, the Chicago Lawyers Committee for Civil Rights. And so it was this really great pairing of attorneys from Neil Gerber and Eisenberg, several in-house attorneys. We all came together at a local neighborhood community development center. We met with small business owners and gave one-on-one legal advice, gave presentations, and it was just a really engaging and frankly feel-good experience for all involved. The attorneys got to engage with each other, and my attorneys got to engage with in-house counsel. They got to engage with the small business owners. And it just built a lot of connection and professional belonging in a way, you know, in a shared sense of giving back, and you can absolutely get that through volunteer work too. But I think engagement's the number one piece, you know, recommitment, rejuvenate optimism amongst your employees. So those are, to me, huge sells and ways to frame pro bono and ways that I think we should be doing more, hopefully. And then the other piece is just like aligning your firm's work. You know, I say firms because I saw more of the attendees were from private firms. Aligning your firm's work with, you know, your firm's overall values and missions, right? We kind of seek out, my firm, nonprofit organizations who are mission driven and aligned with our shared beliefs. And by doing pro bono work for them, I think we're able to kind of change our shared beliefs into purpose and action locally and nationwide. And so to me, the sells would be engagement, for, you know, increasing optimism and recommitment, and then just aligning your firm's values and putting those out there in your community.
And I think I was on a panel this morning. I was local here in person, and one of the panelists said, a happy lawyer is a good lawyer, right? And you can say that about a happy employee is a good employee. The reality of being in the legal professional world is that, you know, there's burnout. There's burnout because at some point, people start feeling like they're just billing numbers and they're just a billing rate. And so the sense of purpose is not there. And so, you know, and firms are investing in employees. Their firms are investing in junior lawyers to train them. And retention really is an issue. And burnout has to do a lot with not feeling like you're doing something. Is this why I went to law school? Just to sit here and build, you know, 2,000 hours for the year, and then what? So for that purpose also, like you said, to rejuvenate and to give the sense of mission, it is so important for firms to invest in their, whether it's legal professionals or whether it's associates or whether it's people who are thinking about going to law school and are clerking there. Make the most of the money that you're investing in these people, right? You could train these people for 2 or 3 years, pay them gobs of money, and then they're just going to get burnt out and leave. What's the point? So why don't you invest in the well-being and the mental health aspect of it right from the get-go? Make them feel like they belong. Make them feel like they're doing something good, that they're having an impact, you know, and it's better for the firm to do it in the long run. So, you know, there's a business reason for doing so too.
That's a great example. And I think as lawyers and, you know, as leaders running firms, we all know that all of the work that we're doing is not necessarily going to be meaningful or in that way all the time. But there's a recent study done this was with doctors, but people who found the work that they do meaningful or purposeful, even 20% of the time, you know, it changed their outlook and their ability to kind of be engaged and be interested in and engaged in their work for like across their whole job, right? So it's not that everything that you do needs to be imbued with sort of inherent meaning, right? But that element is important to find somewhere, right? So I think that's really important. Okay, so let's go back to the practical again and talk a little bit about, you know, how you see people fitting this into their lives and you know, how to overcome some of those barriers to entry, right? So for many people, I think they see this as, you know, they have a lot of competing demands. People are very overwhelmed right now in terms of what they have going on in their lives. So what are some kind of concrete real life examples of ways that you see people integrating both of these things into their lives and their work successfully?
Sure. And in my case, I would say is find something that you're already doing. So for example, if you've got kids and you're taking the kids to soccer games or for baseball games, well, become involved in like coaching. You're already there. You might as well become a little bit more involved, and then you become friends with the parents of the other kids. you become involved in your community. So that now next time you're driving down the road, you can roll down your window and say hi and get recognized by people because now you're Coach Pyle. You don't have to have everything be separate because there's only 24 hours a day. So you can combine it with something that you're already doing because you have, like you have an obligation to do. And so for me, the way I did it was initially, I didn't know what cause was important to me. I didn't know what causes made me, cry. So I tried a whole bunch of different volunteer. I went to the shelter. I went to the food bank. I went to helping kids learn how to do computing. And after doing a few of those, I realized hunger was my passion. So then I said, okay, now I need to find a shelter. And you can do it once and, a one-time pro bono or a one-time volunteer thing, that's perfectly fine. You're helping for that one day. Or you can be like me, where I've got a set schedule every Sunday from 7 a.m. to 1 p.m. I'm at the shelter. Everybody knows about it. That's just the way I am. And I plug off. My phone is away. My clients can't reach me. My coworkers can't reach me. So that, I've made everybody else around me used to the fact that I'm gone for that time. And it's me time. It's not you time. It's not daytime. It's me time. Right. So the barriers, you can't, again, it's all up to you how much time you have, what you're devoted to, but that's a way to do it. And you train everybody else around you to leave you alone for a bit.
And I love how you just said that, Pyle, like it's me time. It's just another way of showing that you're doing good, you're doing well, and you're by doing good, right? You're improving your well-being and having some me time for yourself, but connecting and giving back to your community. So it really excites me. And I want to kind of reference something else you said, Pyle, because I call it habit stacking, right? So you already have a habit, or you already have a value that that's really important to you. And you're like, I don't have additional time to add anything else. I have a lot of things. And so for me, a value is carving out some time to really spend time with really close friends. And, that's very important to me. So I could just plan a dinner with friends, but I've kind of tried to add another value of mine is being able to give back. And so I've tried to add on volunteer pieces where we can. During the pandemic, I was setting up Zoom calls with friends because we couldn't see each other in person. So we just decided to add a vote forward volunteer opportunity where we got together, caught up on Zoom, and also wrote letters to people encouraging them to vote in the elections, right? So you already know I'm planning to see these friends. Just see if you can get friends aligned on a particular issue and volunteer together. The other piece I've seen that I think is helpful that you obviously do with the Sundays is just putting it on your calendar, right? If you're like me and attorneys at my firm, we live and die by our calendars. Put it on your calendar once a month on Fridays. Invite a friend on Friday from 10 to 11:30. We're going to go to Free Legal Answers, the virtual legal clinic. It always has civil legal questions that are available. We're going to answer 3 questions once a month and we'll reconnect together, right? Just have it as a standing piece on your calendar. And once it's in the calendar, I think you're much more likely to do it, because you're carving out that time really and thinking about it. I'm carving out time for my well-being. I'm also helping people and developing skills and making connections, but really, this is a form of self-care.
That is such a good example. I love the idea of habit stacking. I love the idea, Pyle, that you mentioned of kind of coaching, volunteer coaching. If you have to be with your kids anyway. I mean, this for me, I will say my example of taking my kids and bagging groceries. I have 4 kids, and so when they were young, there wasn't really, I didn't really have an option, nor did I want to necessarily go off for the whole day and do something else. So I would find things that we could do together, and we didn't do it. It's not like we did it all the time necessarily, but when we had the time to do it together, we did things like, we delivered Meals on Wheels. That's another thing. Like they need people to deliver, and you can just sign up for a shift. And we would bring our kids. I did it with a neighbor and her kids. There's things like most children's hospitals do an event that is around the holidays where kids can, they basically set up a toy store in the hospital so that kids are hospitalized during the holidays can do that. We would go and we would wrap presents. They were one-off type things that I could do kind of with my family. And I will say my kids, who are now mostly grown, still talk about those things that we did together. And it wasn't, we didn't do them every week, or we didn't do them all the time. So those are just some options of, I think, ways to integrate, which is sort of my favorite thing when it comes to well-being, things that you're already doing, right? You're with something that you'd like to add on. So that's another example. I'm just going to encourage folks now. Linda, you can probably release the second poll question if you'd like, so that we can go ahead and find out kind of what stage folks are at in their career as we think about this. And also, please go ahead while you're answering the poll questions. If you do have questions for Pyle or Rachel, you can go ahead and add those in. Just FYI, Rachel is in Chicago. Is that right, Rachel? Yeah, Rachel's in Chicago and Pyle is in the Boston area. So if you have region or area specific questions, I'm in Washington, D.C. You're welcome to ask those as well. And we can give you some other options.
Yeah, and I'm happy to share even like pro bono options in other metropolitan areas too.
Yeah.
There's some volunteer sites that are helpful to find.
Let's do it. Let's go ahead and start putting those in the chat. So let's start with Chicago. Okay, so we've got lots of mid-career people and a few on either side. So often the mid-career people are often the busiest, right? Because they have a lot of competing obligations. They're sort of at the peak of their career. They may have family obligations, either aging parents or young children or other things going on. So that is helpful to know. Okay, so let's start with Chicago, the Chicago area. If you want to put any resources in the chat, that would be great. You're welcome to ask questions now, and we'll go ahead and start. And actually, Pyle, you can put your resources in the chat too. I'm just going to go ahead and look to the Q&A. Okay. All right, someone said they did not receive the poll question. So the poll question should have popped up on the screen. If you did not see it, but you were here, just go ahead and shoot us an email. And if you want to, if you need that for CLE, just say you didn't get the poll question and you, I'll put my email in the chat.
And I'm going to just share a few general websites that I think are really helpful just to find volunteering opportunities nationwide.
Yeah.
And then, I mean, I'm happy to speak about specific Chicago pro bono opportunities or other.
I mean, for finding volunteers, non-pro bono type of thing, just non-legal work, Google is the best. All I do is volunteer organizations in Boston, volunteer opportunities in Chicago. I mean, Google is going to spit out up the wazoo. The other thing, if you're looking for board opportunities, again, plug that into Google, say, board applicants or nonprofits looking for boards, board members. There's a lot out there to find, especially in metropolitan areas, especially in bigger cities. The other thing to look for is if you're, again, passionate about women's issues, maybe you can look for a women's shelter that's local, women's shelter close to me. If you're passionate about hunger and homelessness, then look for a homeless shelter close to you in that zip code. So again, figuring out what your passion is, what your cause is, and just plug that into Google and say near me, you're going to find so much.
And
okay, so sorry, 1 second. I'm just going to answer some administrative questions. So for folks who didn't get the poll question or it didn't pop up correctly, just go ahead and send an email. I popped my email in. It's tara@cultivate.center. I'll put it down again. And there's also going to be a form, so you can go ahead and do that. And then we'll post the final poll question at the end, and that's probably the one that will be most relevant for attendance anyway. But just go ahead and send me that note so that if you're applying for CLE credit, I can get that all to our CLE coordinator. Okay, sorry, I cut someone off.
No, I think we were okay, right?
Yeah.
Okay,
Yeah.
all right, great. So here's the last and final question that I'm going to give to you both. And if you have any other anything else that you would like to ask, feel free to put it in the chat. But what is, if you could share an impactful story, so something that you have either experienced or something that you've seen happen in sort of the context of pro bono and volunteerism, that would be amazing. So do you want to start, Pyle?
Sure. Again, I go back to the shelter that I am every Sunday. One of the people who was a permanent employee in the shelter was this guy, won't say the name, but he was the dishwasher. And he was always looking, for something else to do, a higher position to go to, but he had a criminal record that was 20, 30 pages long, but from when he was young. I mean, when I met him, he was in his 40s and his 50s, but this criminal record was when he was in his early 20s. And of course, life happens, but he had sorted himself out and he was now gainfully employed, but he wanted to get ahead somewhere else. So he asked me, he says, "Hey, I heard you're a lawyer." I said, "Yeah, why? What can you help me seal my record? Because every time I apply for jobs, it gets in the way." I was like, "All right, I'll help." And so we were able to work together and get a whole bunch of his stuff sealed. And it went from 30 pages down to 1 page. And then he applied for a few jobs and he got it and he went to a different shelter. So I miss him now, but he is now in like the management line for that shelter and so happy. I mean, to me, again, I would have never met that person had I not started volunteering at the shelter and just being in the kitchen every day and knowing him. And now he's like doing so much better, right? And the second story, sorry, I gotta brag about this one. This was in when I was a practitioner in Florida. I did some pro bono work for immigration asylum for people who were in the LGBTQ community. And one of my clients was really well educated back in Colombia, but he was suffering persecution there and almost risked death. Anyways, we went through it. I mean, the representation was just so hard because I mean the stories that he had from the things he had experienced back home were just so difficult. But I got to really know him as a person. And this was 2009, I think, and now it's 2023. He got his asylum, and he kept in touch with me. He got his green card. He got a citizenship. He now manages a bank down in Miami, Florida, which is mind-blowing to me that you can have such one thing that you do for somebody can have such a lifelong impact for them. And it just makes me feel like, oh, I did something good. I helped somebody in a way that, again, the one thing that you did for them gave them a chance at something. So I think, I mean, for me, that's been amazing.
That's okay.
I love that story. Yeah, thank you Pyle for sharing. Rachel, do you have one?
I can share a couple of stories. I wanted to quickly, again, give us a little more language around this. And if you just bear with me for a second, I can't stop talking about it because I also just think that if we're just kind of reframing for ourselves or thinking of these stories, or we're thinking about taking this on or returning to pro bono or volunteer work, just trying to think of it in terms of improving our well-being, I really think will help motivate us, right? So even if we're like thinking about Pyle's story that she just shared, so Tara, you're very familiar with this, I'm sure, but it's a really well-established way to measure well-being. Sometimes people are like, what is well-being? Mindfulness, wellness, how do you measure it? How do you know if you're doing well? And so the PERMA theory of well-being highlights different factors that help you flourish in life, right? That help you not just survive, but thrive. And so I love looking at this and talking about it in this language and kind of using this tool perhaps for you to decide where you're going to use your limited time. And so even if we're looking at Pyle's example that she shared, right, you know, her work in asylum cases are incredibly long and difficult and challenging and can last years, right? But it contributed greatly to her client's life, and it really changed the whole trajectory of his life in a positive way. But it also contributed to her overall well-being, right? Gave her positive emotions, helped her feel engaged, you know, really using her strengths to help in a challenging task. It helped her build relationships both with her client and I'm sure with the fellow attorneys with whom she worked, if she worked on it. And really gave her a sense of meaning and purpose. Pyle's brought that up a lot, feelings of purpose. And I think when you're doing pro bono work or volunteer work, you're serving something bigger than yourself. And you're doing something perhaps slightly different than your day-to-day work. And gave Pyle this great feeling of accomplishment, right? Like this is something that I accomplished and directly helped. And you know, you might not always win in your pro bono work. You might be dealt a difficult case, but at the very least, you're giving that client, you know, their day in court. You're giving that client someone to listen and to hear them and to kind of accept some of their pain. And that in itself is an accomplishment. And you know, that's helping you build skills too. So I just love, I mean, I think this theory of well-being is a great way to help you just to think about and decide when you're trying to decide where to spend your time. But I really hope that we can all take this back to our employers as a way to kind of help reframe and think about well-being or pro bono work as well, because it's a form of well-being. So, you know, all my inspiring stories kind of go along those lines. You'll see that they kind of meet the PERMA theory of well-being, and I really like thinking about it that way.
Okay, I love that. And I have one final question that was put in the chat, but before we do that, I am going to kind of ask for a bit of a positive emotion explosion. Okay, so I'm going to ask people to do two things. People have started to do it already because I put it in the chat. But if you have a volunteer experience or a pro bono experience that you would like to share, things that you, people you've represented, you know, experiences you've had, something that was particularly meaningful, just things you've done so that people can see sort of this vast opportunity of experience that's out there, please put it in the chat. And then once we've done that, before we leave, since we cannot, there's no applause here, if everyone could share some expressions of gratitude with Rachel and Pyle, that would be lovely. So you can say anything you want, just thank you. You can say something that you're taking away from this. You can say something that was meaningful to you. That would be amazing. So your experiences and then something that was meaningful in lieu of applause. And then Linda, you can release the final poll question. And then also, for those that missed the CLE instruction, I put the link to the CLE questionnaire, which is basically how you will apply for CLE credit if you're in a state where you have to apply, right? Otherwise, you can just self-report. And then you can go ahead and fill that out. If for some reason you do not see the link or it's not working for you, it will be available on the iWill website. That's lawyerwellbeing.net. And so you can go ahead and find that as well. And then our last quick question is, how can we help potential clients seek pro bono services? Do you have an idea for that?
Yeah, so for me, I've had lots of people, you know, come to me and say, hey, can you help me with this? And then when they say they have to, you know, the billable rates are what they are. So I've got definitely the bar associations have lawyer referral services for, you know, low income or for people who are indigent. There's also legal aid. If it's something that's immigration related, I send them to MIRA, which I know is, you know, helps with people on immigration issues. So just for my own purpose, I create a list of, you know, the types of legal services somebody needs, and then I know where to send them to. And again, I just find them based on my connections to the legal community, or just go on Google. But it's the easiest way is to send them to the lawyer referral service at your local bar organization, and they can help find legal services provider for you.
Wonderful.
And I echo that. And also, if you're at a firm that has someone who's in the pro bono role, pro bono counsel, corporate social responsibility role, they can also assist. So bar associations, bar foundations, like Kyle mentioned, and then there's a lot of the large metropolitan areas have specific referral services. So.
Wonderful. Thank you so much. On that note, we're going to end. I'm going to save the chat. So if anyone else wants to sign off and say thanks to Rachel and Pyle, you're welcome to. I hope that you have a great rest of your week, and I hope to see you in the future at one of our other programs later this week. And don't forget, if you have any trouble, you can email me, or you can email IWill about the CLE. And we look forward to seeing you soon. So cheers. Thanks, Rachel. Thanks, Pyle.
Thank you, everybody.
Thank you so much. And thanks to everyone for their inspirational notes in the chat. I'm reading all
I love reading it. I just
Yeah,
love everything coming through.
I'm going to save it and send it to you. So
like an inspiring community. So
Thank you, everybody. Bye-bye.